Welcome to everyone joining us for this evening's Nutshell discussion. If it's your first Nutshell, you're really in for a treat. My name is Kelly Gilbo. I'm one of the 2 outreach coordinators for the Savanna Institute. Before we get started tonight, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Savanna Institute. If you've never joined us before, we're a nonprofit organization that's focused on research and education about agroforestry. And that means working with trees that produce crops, which help make farms more profitable, resilient, and healing for the environment. This can take many forms depending on the farm and their goals. A lot of our work is doing research in cooperation with farmers, and we connect farmers and scientists at universities and other organizations. We host events at farms, and we even have a perennial farm gathering each year. That's this year, December 7th and 8th, so save the date. Registration is live now. That aims at helping farmers share what they're learning with each other and more broadly. We also develop educational resources, and all of this can be found on our website, savannainstitute.org. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Hegner Family Foundation and North Central STAIR. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to bring you these discussions for free. So thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. Just a few housekeeping things. If you're joining us from a computer, I'll invite you to share any questions or comments during the discussion in the chat box of the platform. So in the little pop-up screen that you should all see, there's a tiny bubble, a chat bubble, and you can type in any questions or thoughts during the discussion, and we can address those at the end during the Q&A session. And so that is about 45 after. We'll turn it over, and I'll enable the Q&A time, and you'll be able to use your microphone to ask whatever questions you have to our speaker this evening. So without further ado, we're honored to welcome our presenter tonight, Mark Cornwell. Mark has extensive education and professional experience in the horticulture field, including as a senior horticulturist with the University of Michigan, Grounds and Waste Management Department, where he was responsible for all the facets of campus landscape management. In 1995, he became chairperson for the university's salt use reduction team, where he helped establish best management practices designed to reduce salt and sand use during winter maintenance. In 2002, Mark transitioned to the private sector, where he advanced the use of liquid anti-icing and de-icing chemicals. He established his winter maintenance best practices consulting business, that's called Sustainable Salting Solutions, LLC, in 2009. And the services offered with this company focus on inventory and analysis of existing winter maintenance practices, calibration and material placement training, and road condition monitoring. Most recently, Mark has begun conducting living snow fence research. And this is what we'll be talking about tonight. And the Savanna Institute is excited to bring this innovative topic to our Nutshell series. So with that, I will turn it over to Mark to get started.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate this opportunity to have a chat tonight about creating mutually beneficial partnerships to tackle transportation challenges and blending agroforestry practices with right-of-way management. And I hope everybody's had a great day. It's been a beautiful day up here in Michigan, and was able to get a lot done. So next slide, please. Thank you. I want to start off with share a topic that is of great interest to me, and to give you a little background on where I'm from. I'm originally born and raised in Springfield, Illinois, and one of the places that I spent a lot of time as a young person was along the Illinois River. Well, it wasn't until later in life that I ran across this essay by James Patchen and Gerald Wilhelm. They're up in Chicago area, entitled "The Ecology of Culture and Water." And I found this essay or article, whatever you want to call it, to be just fascinating in that it based its discussion on original surveyor notes of the people in the basically 300 years ago, coming across the prairies in Illinois and encountering the Illinois River, which in their notes they indicated it was just an incredibly beautiful river with species that we can't even comprehend today, parakeets and other things like that, and how the land use has changed the dynamics of our watersheds and our rivers and lakes and streams. And I think this really kind of became one of the most important aspects of my work with the de-icing project. But I wanted to share this, even though I know it is a little off topic. Next. More to our discussion. I kind of thought about snowflakes like tumbleweeds blowing across the road, and then at some point they get caught up in stuff and they collect. And here's a picture of tumbleweeds collecting on a fence, and ironically, kind of like a snowdrift in a parking lot in a mall. Next. But our real problem that we're working on with our Living Snow Fence project is blowing snow. And next. Basically, this blowing snow creates this serious motorist problems because you don't know for sure where you're going to encounter slick road conditions, because the whole road may not be iced over. And this can get people in trouble. And of course, there's a lot of inconsistencies. Next. And obviously, the road agencies deal with these snow events for days and days, sometimes after the event, dealing with blowing snow. And it just creates a huge expense for road agencies. Actually something we're working on our project. Next. They've been estimating that plowing snowdrifts costs about 100 times more than the snow fences. Now, in this case, this research was done on snow fencing that was not living snow fence, just constructed fencing, and a lot of work out west where snow drifting was even a greater problem. Next. But if you look at the total costs that go into removing snow, and we're talking, equipment and labor and fuels and all the financial inputs that would go into cleaning that roadway, snow fences could reduce our snow removal costs up to 50%, and that does represent a big part of road agencies' annual budgets. Next. And of course, the subject that was near and dear to me, salt is a huge budgetary factor for road agencies, and more is showing up as an environmental and infrastructure problem. I live about 20 miles south of Flint, and ironically, it was first implicated in the mobilization of the lead in the pipes in Flint. And then obviously, we've had a big tax increase here in Michigan to try to fix all the roads, and potholes are a daily story here in Michigan, and we've had a pretty significant increase in our taxes trying to fix them. And there is plenty of a connection between that and road salt. Next. Obviously, the roads system in the United States just continues to grow, and every year with inflation and such, the cost to build and maintain those roads also grows. Next. If you're going to expand those roads, you got to have more right-of-way, and right-of-way acquisition is expensive, and obviously can be very contentious. Next. This is a pretty typical, cloverleaf, if you will, an exit off of a major highway, and I know we've had people in my township that have been interested in having an exit put in, and I understand the costs are just in the millions after you acquire the land, the construction, everything that involved. But if you look at the picture here, you can see where there's a whole lot of land that gets gobbled up in the maintenance and building of those roadways. And I can assure you the road agencies are very frugal about not taking any more than they absolutely feel is necessary to engineer and build these roads, and then of course to maintain them. Next. I picked up, I wanted to find out, I was trying to get a number nationally of how much land there was in road right-of-ways, because it has to have been a staggering number. Well, I found this, and that is really the only thing I was able to come up with, and it indicated that nearly 5 million acres are in highway right-of-ways. Now, I'm assuming that doesn't mean secondary roads, city, municipal, whatever. There's transportation, other utility corridors, other things that could be also taken land. Next. But here is, I think, probably the real crux of the issue, and that this graphic here indicates basically how snow drifts are affected by vertical elements such as a fence. And essentially you're looking at a snowdrift shadow of about 35 times the height on the leeward side. So if that snow fence was 10 feet high, you'd need 350 feet before it tapers off to a roadway. And so unfortunately, well, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, most of the agency's right-of-ways don't come close to having that much space. Next. This is a living snow fence planting around Winona, Illinois, and you can see I'm taking the picture from the road, so there's not a lot of distance between the right-of-way fence and the edge of the highway. And basically, the last 2 winters we've been working on this project, we've had hardly any snow at all. It's been very, very mild and for the most part, and real weak snows. 1 to 2 inches, 3 inches at times, but it's amazing how that small amounts of snow can build up in places where you don't want it. Next. This is a term called the fetch, and I always marvel at this, now living in Michigan now since 1975, when I come back home and I look across these fields and wonder how many miles I can see across there, and one can imagine that that drop of snow that falls out there on the horizon might, due to the wind, find its way to that fence. And then, as you can see, just even this fence with 6-inch openings and the grass that kind of grows along it does trap some snow. But that snow is pretty much free to blow all the way across that field for a long distance, and this is an important aspect of our research and the modeling. Next. The name of our project is Design of Living Barriers to Reduce the Impacts of Snowdrifts on Illinois Freeways, and it's been supported by the Illinois Center for Transportation. Our principal investigator is Sean-Ming Shi from Washington State University. We have Dr. Lee from Southern Illinois University, and John Petrie now at Caltrans in California, working with the modeling. But we have a real good group of folks with Illinois DOT that we're working with and to help us this. But we're trying to keep our roads clear of snow and ice, and do it with natural vegetation, living snow fences such as prairie grasses, plants, and trees, strategically designed and planted to reduce blowing and drifting snow. Next. Here is actually Dr. Lee and one of her graduate students. We're getting ready to put in some of our measuring stakes. The measuring stakes are used to physically measure the snow accumulations during events so that we can use that data for our purposes of modeling. Next. Here's sort of basically a finished product, and as you can see, there's really not a lot of room if I'm standing on the edge of the road, because that mown area there's a 15-foot clear mown area right off the edge of the pavement. And then this is some living snow fence, a great twig dogwood. And so as you can see, though, I think those are probably at 10 foot or 20 foot with spacing. I forget which this one is. I think they're 10 foot spacing. So you can see there's not a lot of room there. Next. So why are we here? And why is it important that we figure out some other alternatives? Well, I think we can see that our right-of-way space is pretty much going to be inadequate to trap the potential snows that we could get. And this is an example of some snow fence work that's been done up in Minnesota. And there's been a real super amount of cooperation and efforts to keep the roads clear, because these folks drive these roads and they want them safe, and if they can help reduce the amount of salt, the amount of cost and everything that goes into keeping them clear, they're really doing everybody a great favor. But you know, we can improve driver visibility, reduce accidents. We can serve as visual cues to help drivers find their way. We reduce the use of public money by reducing plow and heavy vehicle traffic. We reduce shipping delays for goods and services, increase crop yields by up to 10% or more, control soil erosion and reduce spring flooding by keeping soil sediment out of the ditches to maintain proper drainage. We lessen our impact on the environment with less salt use, fewer truck trips, and less fuel consumption. Depending upon the type of living snow fence selected, grassland, nesting birds, and pollinators habitat is improved to create an oasis for those species to survive and thrive. And obviously that's growing in much greater importance every day. Increased opportunities to view and hunt pheasant and other game birds, so hunting opportunities are enhanced by improving habitat. Next. So what we're trying to do is determine an optimum living snow fence configuration for effectiveness. When in not only, well, I mean, we're confined to the right-of-way because that's the only thing that we can work with right now, and that's what we're working with is merely with the right-of-way. But I think it's probably pretty clear that we're going to need, realistically, we need more space. Next. This slide, this graphic kind of gives you an idea of two different types of porous natures of the snow fence. The picture on the top might be a single row of trees and has a 70% porosity. And so 15 times the height out from the road, you can kind of see where the accumulation of the snow drift would occur. And then you got the roadway surface over here. And in the bottom one, you have a 10 to 30% porous snow fencing, and in this case, two rows of a conifer, and you're going to build up a greater level right behind it. I always think about this because I see people line their north-south driveways with evergreens, and I think, well, they must like to plow, or they like to run their snow blowers. But at any rate, ideally, next, we're trying to, it's pretty well known that somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% porosity is probably the best advantage, but for trapping snow in terms of our living snow fence. But managing the height of that snow fence is also going to be a critical issue. And I threw this up there. I said, well, what if the road edge was only 100 feet from the right-of-way? And in this case, if again, doing the math on the bottom with the evergreens, if it's 10 feet tall and you can see where 150 feet is, so 50 feet out there, we're going to have snow piling up. So the right-of-way becomes a real critical issue. Next. I don't really want to read all this, but essentially, you know, the porosity and height of the barrier, as the plants grow and change, it changes the length of the downward drift. And as the barrier becomes less porous, more snow is stored in the upwind drift, and downwind drift becomes shorter. So these are, these are the real kind of engineering challenges that we have to face dealing with a living structure. Much different than putting a physical snow fence in. Next. Minnesota has been doing some work with living snow fence, and also actually in the State University of New York, they've been doing a lot of work with living snow fence and they've been looking at coppicing willows. And again, going back to the porosity, by pruning off the plant at the base, you're going to, with plants that have an opportunity to sucker, you're going to get a greater level of density in the plant itself, and hence more ability to trap snow. They have been working with willows, as I understand it. They were looking at this as a biomass, because obviously one of the key aspects of living snow fence on the other side of the right-of-way is that there has to be good economics. I mean, it's essential that there be good economics, and that economics has to provide better income than corn or soybeans or whatever, or be subsidized in some other way. But you got to think we can rely on that. Next. I really had the great fortune of learning of Kevin Wolf's work and the work that they were doing at the University of Illinois research plots in Champaign, where they were coppicing various types of trees and things to look at. I'm assuming it was biomass. We really I never really got a chance to meet with anybody on site, but I was told where the plots were, so I went out and I looked at the plots. I was really quite impressed by the concept, and I don't know. Ever since then, I've been thinking about other plants and how they might be able to be used in this capacity. Next. I just threw this slide in for everyone's reference if you wanted to look up a summary of existing living snow fence programs in North America. And so I try to include links to the data. So if you want to do a little further investigation, there's the links. Next. So living snow fences certainly have their challenges. I think I've beat up the sufficient right-of-way space adjacent to the highway is essential and often inadequate. And of course, there's costs to install and maintain living snow fences. And again, budgets being what they are, it's quite difficult to squeeze additional funding out of existing budgets, even though we know that they can be effective. Matching plant selection to environmental obstacles and desired characteristics. We got wet soils, we have dry soils, we have blowing open areas, we have salt spray. A lot of things that could impact the actual growing factors of the plants used in our living snow fence. And then, of course, how do we take care of them? Or what are the maintenance practices are going to look like? Market forces, I think I mentioned that too. What can we plant that will equal or exceed existing cropping practices? Harvesting techniques. What's economically feasible? And I mean, it really kind of just plays off that the market forces. Can we do it and make money? Plant selection cannot interfere with adjacent farming operations. This is really important because they already have, I'm sure, in the headlands and some of those areas along those right-of-ways, they probably already have some diminished yield just due to environmental factors. And then last, a matching harvest cycle and timing to provide benefit for snow trapping. So when we harvest those plants, we got to leave them standing for the most part during the winter months. Now, Obviously, if we, at some point we're going to have to harvest them and let them regrow, we're going to have to do that. And that's just going to be part of what we have to deal with. And maybe they'll have to put up temporary fencing to trap the snow while they're regenerating. Next. But the benefits of living snow fence partnerships and living snow fence, I believe they're going to way outweigh the challenges. Next. We can reduce blowing snow, we can reduce accidents and save lives, and that's probably the primary mission. I would say that's the primary mission of the road agencies, and that's their goal. Next. If we can help them by reducing the operational costs and improve the efficiency for their budgets, then maybe that money can be put to other things to improve our transportation needs. Over. Or next. I'd like to, obviously, if we can create new economic opportunities for farmers. I was 5 years in commercial agriculture when I graduated from college, Michigan State, and I actually worked in the seed business, seed corn, soybeans, and so I worked with farmers for 5 years, and that was during the 80s when the commodity prices just tanked, and it was a really tough time for farmers. Next. We can provide new habitat for decimated and essential pollinators. That's becoming more critical every day. Next. And this is something I ran into. I've heard about this because when we were used to be burning leaded gas, the lead in the gas would precipitate out into the soils adjacent to the roadways. And when dust would be blown around, people would be ingesting lead. But now they're looking at that it's called 2.5 ppm, and basically there are particulate matters being emitted from vehicles traveling along the highway, and that there's some pretty serious health issues related to that. And I believe these living snow fences have the potential to sequester some of these airborne pollutants. Next. We can help mitigate wind-blown soil erosion. Next. We provide new avenues for groundwater infiltration and regeneration, and this goes back to that very first slide with the ecology of water. When you think about the prairies, pre-settlement, every drop of water that fell on the prairies worked its way down into the subsoil and then moved slowly with gravity to its lowest point, which would have been the rivers and streams. So there was a pretty constant and steady natural flow. Next. Again, enhance the wildlife habitat for hunting opportunities. Next. But I think we're all talking about how we can save money in our taxes and how big a challenge is that we have today with our tax dollars. So if we could save money in this regard, it could be diverted to more useful purposes. Next. Anyway, here's a link. I ran across this in doing some research for this talk. And so it's fairly recent, January 10th, 2017, and then there's the link at the bottom. And so, I think we've gotten a pretty good idea that there are some ways that we can mitigate these airborne pollutants. Next. And I've been thinking about the Dust Bowl issue since I've been working with the guys with the DOT, and they tell me that they have to literally sometimes plow soil off the roads and then, of course, excavate it out of the ditches because it fills the ditches in and then there's no drainage. And I guess the Dust Bowl was in, what was it, about 1930s. And, at the time, go to the next slide, please. FDR had, they had started a big program to develop shelter belts, and as a kid, I used to play in those shelter belts down in Springfield, Illinois. They were Osage orange, but I ran across this, and I just thought, man, this is just horrible. This was a shelter belt in Nebraska, and it was one of the original ones put in. And they actually had road signage and everything for this shelter belt, adjacent to the shelter belt. And the farmer decided that, no, he didn't want that there anymore, and tore it all out so he could get in a few more rows of corn. And, it's like you think about that old line of those who forget history are condemned to repeat it. And who knows? Our climate's changing, and we could have anything happen. Next. And of course, the bees and the butterflies. I'm happy to say I've seen more of both this year. I let all my milkweeds grow, and I do everything I can. I even delay mowing my clover and my grass sometimes when I go out and I see bees all over it. So if we're going to eat, we're going to have pollinators, or we're not going to have any food. Next. I put this slide up. I had the good fortune of being able to go through the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People with Stephen Covey's program, and one of the required paradigm is a paradigm shift and a willingness to look at different perspectives. And that's really kind of what we're talking about here. It's a change of mindset of what we can do in those areas adjacent to the right-of-ways. And the first habit is being proactive. And obviously, I think I've made a pretty strong case that we need to do something and we need to be proactive. But we begin with the end in mind. We want to know that what we're going to do is going to be successful. We put first things first, and very, very important, we think win-win. We want the road agencies to win, and we want those adjacent landowners to win. And in doing so, we need to seek first to understand their perspective before we hope that they will understand us. Then synergize. Well, hopefully that's what we're doing tonight, is through organizations like the Savanna Institute, and anytime you have an opportunity to share knowledge and information with people, we synergize, and we continue to sharpen the saw. We learn from our mistakes and our successes, and we build from there. Next. I was trying to come up with a graphic. I thought of this at 5 o'clock in the morning today. And it's like, if this was a fence, the vertical axis was the fence. The mind your own business concepts that the person on the right side and the left side of the fence is like, hey, don't bother me. I got my own stuff to take care of. But the problem today is that our challenges are too important to have a closed mind and not try to find a way to have a mutually beneficial arrangement. Next. So we want to forge creative and mutually beneficial partnerships. That should be our goal. Next. And I'll leave it on this one. And I wish I could tell you I have all the answers, because I certainly don't. But I've always loved this Ralph Waldo Emerson quote: "A weed is a plant whose virtues have not yet been discovered." And now we're not necessarily talking about weeds. We can be talking about woody plants. We can be talking about nuts. We could be talking about a lot of things. I know the Pacific yew has been used to treat cancer. So there's probably a lot of things that we haven't thought of, and that we have to begin to think out of the box. Next. So with that, I'm going to close up and open it up to questions, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark. What an interesting, I hope, change of perspective for our listeners, introducing them to some new concepts here. So I wanted to say first, I know there were several links in the slides, and so in the follow-up email that I'll send after we're done tonight, I'll include those links as well, so you all can follow up on that. So at this point, I'll open the, and so those of you on your computer should see a pop-up. You can click that to get in the queue and ask a question to Mark about anything he said there, or share some ideas or whatever input you have. For anyone on your phone, you can dial *6 to also get in that queue. So we will see if anybody's got something to say here. While they are thinking, I'll get the ball started. And I'm wondering, Mark, if there are any legal or policy considerations that a landowner should consider if they're wanting to install a living fence, or is it more on the responsibilities of the DOT, the county officials? How does that work?
Well, that's really a good question, and it's kind of something I probably should have spent a little bit more time on here, because collaborative partners, obviously, if we're going to think out of the box, we need to think beyond just collaborative partners of the DOTs. Like I said before, their budgets are all already severely strained, and if we could, look at other avenues like soil conservation services, or what am I thinking of? Pheasants Forever, those types of groups that want to try to improve habitat. There may be funds of private foundations and things that understand the importance of these things, and so there could be other partners that could help. The legality of the issues, it's the private landowner's property, and because we're talking about the space, on the private landowners on the other side of the right-of-way fence. So I guess you're free to do what you want to do. And unfortunately, you could get into growing conifers there, and evergreens could. I can tell you, evergreens in certain places can be treacherous because they shade the pavement, and in some instances, and then you'll have openings where they're sunny, and people drive with their cruise control, and they hit a patch of ice, and they had a head-on collision. So there's a lot of thought needs to go into these things, and that's where having an opportunity to talk and communicate back and forth across the fence is important. And I always like to say, when I speak at other programs, the groups, I always say, if I haven't learned something from the people that I'm talking with at the end of this, this has not been very successful. So I hope you can share with me some of your experiences that you're doing to work with this concept.
Great. Yes. Anybody on the line? Another reminder: if you don't want to use your voice to ask a question or share an idea, you can type anything into the chat box, and I can read it for you. I'm not seeing anything yet. You mentioned evergreens can be treacherous and that sort of thing. I'm wondering if you can. Are certain tree species better than others? What sort of characteristics make a good living fence?
Well, yeah, if we're again, it's the height and the wind shadow is the critical element, and how much space we have in the right of way. So if we only had 100 feet of right of way, and somebody decided to plant, let's say, a white pine, and they were going to get into growing trees for logs, and the trees were right up next to the highway, and the highway happened to be oriented east and west. You can imagine as the trees grow, we're going to see shading. And I actually observed this on M72 up in Grayling, and you'd have stretches of road where there would be no evergreens, because we have a lot of evergreens in northern Michigan. And in this case, the snow had been plowed off, but there had been meltwater flowing across the highway. And in the areas where there was no evergreens and the sun was shining, it dried the road out. But in those areas that were shaded by the conifers, that meltwater started to refreeze and make black ice. And this was a 2-lane highway, so you can imagine that those kind of things can be very dangerous. So yeah, it really the species of plants and trees that it would be, they would have to, you'd want to try to tailor those to, again, your distances, and obviously your financial needs, what you're intending to grow. And some plants maybe you might only get 20, 30 feet and have, I mean, that's what we're looking at in our project, like a Washington hawthorn, as a nice overall mature height and has a nice density. But we're just examining and looking for different kinds of plants, but we don't have to be concerned necessarily with the economics in the right of way. It's more the maintenance and consistency that we need to be concerned about. But on the private landowner side, we're going to want to be talking about how can this put money in the pocket.
Definitely, yeah, and the cultivation of whatever kind of nuts or berries or whatever that they might be able to harvest from those trees. Yeah.
Where, I'm just curious, where are my audience from here? Are you from Wisconsin? Are you from Illinois?
If folks want to type in their location there, that would be useful to know. We've got Patrick from Georgia.
Midwest, or?
Patrick's from Georgia. So do you know anything about Southeast and their use of living?
Georgia. Oh my. Wow. Well, yeah, you guys have been getting some nasty ice storms. I don't know how much snow you get down there. Well, I guess Atlanta, you had some crippling snows and ice storms, but so I don't know. This may be a little bit off topic for you.
Well, I'm thinking of, where was that map there of the established programs already? Let me go back. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
It makes sense that places without snow might not have living snow fences, but certainly maybe you can speak to all the other benefits of this, not just mitigating this.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, right, unfortunately, I don't know, who knows what the price of corn and soybeans and some of these commodities are going to be this year. I mean, I'm hearing that there's going to be just an incredibly good crop. So the question is, will we have $5 corn or will we have $3 corn? And so, it's a gross profits or gross out of the field. And here in Illinois, if we average 200 bushel to the acre, which is pretty standard, I guess, and corn is $5 a bushel, you're gonna net roughly gross $1,000 an acre of that commodity. Well, maybe there's other commodities that you might be able to gross a whole lot more than that, and in the process, keep providing all those other benefits, wildlife enhancement, groundwater infiltration, just sequestration of pollution, so on and so forth. So it really entails thinking out of the box and how you could use that space on your property to make more money and do all the good things.
Patrick is adding that he's interested in this. They do have ice there in Georgia, and is interested in this for shelter belts for wind and chemicals. So you've addressed that.
Yes. Well, and Patrick, I'm sorry, you were from, again? You were from?
That was the Georgia. He's from Georgia.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Just another question. Yeah. Wind and chemicals. That's an interesting point you bring up, because in Grand Haven area in Holland, Michigan, is along Lake Michigan. They had a lot of problems with the blueberry crop, and in this case, it was wind-blown salt. You can imagine. I mean, I've seen studies that salt can travel as far as a mile. So they were trying to create shelter belts to protect the crops from the wind-blown salt damaging their blueberry crops. And then it was pretty much documented that, you know, the salt was damaging the buds and inhibiting, or was playing around with messing with dormancies and things of that nature. So, yeah, if you have chemicals that are being used on adjacent properties that you want to try to sequester, yeah, I would imagine that they would be very beneficial. I don't know if that's answering your question or not.
Well, I don't think it was a question so much as why Patrick is interested in this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
And he's saying thank you for that. I know there's some research being done on pollinator habitat in roadsides and the pros and cons of that habitat being so close to roads. As you mentioned, all the airborne pollutants from cars, you know, if those fall on those plants, which are habitat, maybe they're not getting into the crops which humans eat, but it's on the leaves that the caterpillars eat and that sort of thing. So,
yep.
So, you know, lots of considerations there.
Yeah, there really are. No, I've even thought. I mean, there's a product that's been being used. It's called beet juice. That's used as a de-icing agent and to help to stick the salt and stuff to the pavement. And well, we also use sugar beets to attract deer. So then, I mean, I've also thought, yeah, you know, we're going to line the roadsides with wildflowers and such. Are we going to get more bird strikes? And there's nothing I hate worse than hitting a bird. You know, I just so I even hate hitting the monarchs and swallowtails.
Sure. Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's a lot of research being done as these roadsides are, you know, if this is what we have left for habitat and for other uses like living snow fences, you know, how do we use that land in the right way, in the best way for all the species that are involved.
Yep.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions come in. Are there any final words from you, Mark, or any other comments?
Yeah, Kelly, I'm curious, is the presentation available to those that signed up if they wanted to see it later? I know I don't have the words to the verbiage, but I don't know if you record it or not. Or
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that segue. Yeah, so this has been recorded, and within the next 48 hours or so, I'll be sending an email to everyone who registered with the link to the YouTube video as well as the PDF slides. And,
wonderful.
And as I mentioned before, I'll also link to some of the links so folks can just click on that from the email to that YouTube video and that sort of thing. So yeah, and for those listening, also in that email will be a quick survey about our General Nutshell series, and we'd love to get whatever feedback you have on these. We definitely take them into consideration and implement whatever feedback you have. But that's all I've got, so if you've got any final words, Mark, we should be good to go.
No, I just thank everyone for taking time out of your busy day today. It was such a beautiful day. I was surprised anybody would want to join us tonight.
Well, I was thinking it's strange talking so much about snow when it's perfect weather here in Madison.
Yeah. Well, it's around the corner, unfortunately. So, and I'm, you know, the project in Illinois, you know, we're funded another year, and hopefully we might have our conclusions, you know, by the end of next fiscal year. And those will be available. So, and
great.
So thank you very much.
Well, yeah, thank you. We'll keep an eye out for those updates and share whatever you have. We're happy to share them with our audience. But that sounds great. Thank you again to everyone for joining us. Keep an eye out for the upcoming nutshells. We've got our whole fall series scheduled, so make sure to attend some. They're every other week. And thanks again, Mark, for your time and expertise.
My pleasure.
All right. We'll see everyone next time. Good night.